This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions. I just wanted to let you know before we start the podcast that I am doing an online podcast course, how to be able to create, get your guests, scale it and monetize it. So please do go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and go into the contact us bit. I'm looking for new people to be able to be a podcast creator and really to be able to develop their skills and knowledge into a podcast. So as I said, go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and sign up. Thanks. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. I'm a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas, and comments. Today we have John Ball, who's a presentation and influence coach. Hello, John. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show, Mark.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. So we're going to talk through your career and some of your highlights, but I'm going to go all the way back to your degree. So you did a degree at University of Leicester, which I also went to as well. All the best go there. And you did a law, English and drama degree. Why did you choose that balance between law, English and drama?
Initially, I started out with law, English and music, but I didn't enjoy music very much. Law, I had already done at A-level, and I felt like I was on a path, or I wanted to be on a path towards a career in law. And I had been told that drama would be a good accompaniment for that. And I enjoy English literature, so that just seemed like a good thing. I wouldn't choose it again if I could go back now, knowing everything that I know, but at the time it felt like the right thing, and I pretty much enjoyed it as well.
And so what would you do now if you could tell your 18-year-old self? What would you choose to do?
If I could go back and tell myself back then, I would take myself down more of a path of studying psychology, philosophy, things that I'm more interested in now.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you've progressed into a friend of mine did a philosophy degree, and he's gone into investment banking, and his sort of justification is that it gave him a pathway of understanding logical arguments and being able to understand logic. Is that something that you found with your fascination with philosophy?
Absolutely. I think it was through studying philosophy that I got introduced to the idea of skeptical thinking and understanding cognitive biases and logical fallacies and things like that, which I think has helped me in cleaning up my own thinking more. And I wouldn't say completely. I think it's always a continuing job, but absolutely found that stuff very helpful in terms of deriving argument and being able to perhaps justify positions more and to think about things on somewhat deeper levels.
Okay, awesome. So I see that after your degree, you joined BA in the cabin crew. So I bet you've got stories to tell about that. Just we'll talk about one or two.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories around that, but it was mainly that one of my first stories from that is that I never even thought I would get in. You know, I had known people who were cabin crew for British Airways before I did the job, and they were all like people who worked part-time with models and things like that, and that wasn't me, and so I was fairly convinced that I wasn't really sort of up to that sort of standard. I wasn't going to be modelling down the aisle like it was a catwalk or anything like that. Yeah. So it surprised me a bit when one of my friends who had a contact in British Airways recruitment said that she thought I should apply to it, and got her friend to send me an application form.
So do you think that the sort of customer service that you learn in BA, do you think that's given you a business advantage later on in life?
I would say it's given me an advantage in terms of relationship building and being able to understand people and hopefully meet their needs as well, and to always present myself with a good attitude. Although if you've ever flown with British Airways, you know that not every cabin crew member is like that. Right? But I've always aimed to be happy with what I do in my work, and I want that to transfer through to the people who I'm serving as well. So whether I'm serving food and drinks at 35,000 feet, or whether I'm serving coaching or products or training here on the ground, is serving. The principles of service are the same.
I'm going to be a bit cheeky here. I'm going to push you on a story. Can you give me a story from the BA times that you can tell?
It's hard to think of things that are actually suitable, but to be broadcast, that is. I guess there must be some. It feels like I'm being on the spot a bit. I was, probably one of the most interesting ones was in my first year of flying. And I flew short haul, first of all, out of Heathrow. Yeah. So I was doing a flight on Boxing Day in 1998 into Belfast. And the winds were really, really strong that day. And so to a point where some flights weren't actually landing. And we were on a little 737, not exactly the biggest plane going, a Boeing 737. Yeah. And there was me sort of still in my first 6 months of flying, sat at the back of a 737, and it was sort of leering from side to side really heavily. We had to be strapped in because the winds were so strong. And you could hear people being sick in the cabin, and people were getting very panicky and screaming as well. And I was sat at the back with another crew member, and we were clinging onto each other. That honestly thought that was it. That was the end. We didn't know why they were trying to land in those sorts of conditions. And yet somehow we got on the ground, we bounced down. But then we were on the plane for about an hour because they couldn't bring the steps out to the plane. It was too windy for the air steps that the plane has itself. No. But they couldn't wheel the steps out because they kept blowing over in the winds. No. So it was a bit of a crazy time, and that was probably the first time flying where I ever thought that that might be my last flight.
With it for how long?
Oh, I was about 12 years there.
Right.
And there were certainly a few other incidents as well, but I think if anything, that helped me to just sort of remain calm in a crisis. If I survived what I thought was certain death one time, I just thought there's no point getting too excited about it. Let's just deal with it, stay calm, and if I'm going to go out, I'd rather be calm and just go with it.
Okay, that's wonderful. So you took on a role in NLP skills mastery as a coach. So tell me about that, because you obviously were in BA, and you took a couple of other roles in between that. But you got into one of your areas, which I think you've had or do have a fascination with, which is coaching. So tell me about that role, your first role in coaching.
Sure. It wasn't necessarily my first role, but it's probably the first one that I listed on my profile. I'd already several years before, and then had gone and done neurolinguistic programming training on top of that, and was doing some work in events in that area as well. And then with a group of people who I got to meet and know well through that area, we set up a training company to start doing neurolinguistic programming training at a more advanced level with some of the deep knowledge that we had from one of the guys who was an expert who joined in with us and through our network. And that was a lot of fun. And we did a variety of events for a while. It didn't pan out in the long term, but it was a good experience.
So just tell me a little about neurolinguistic programming. What does that exactly mean?
Yeah, it's almost hard to define in some ways, but it's essentially a process of where John Grinder and Richard Bandler analysed psychoanalysts and psychotherapists and the most successful ones, and aimed to speed up their processes for getting results as quickly as possible using tools like hypnosis and linguistic patterns that help to say rewire people's brains, but we couldn't exactly say it's rewiring their brains so much as just enabling people to think about things a little bit differently.
And so how does so if we think about that and we think about how people develop psychologically and how to enable people to gain success, what type of people were you sort of targeting? Who were your clients?
Most of the people who I was working with, because we were teaching advanced neurolinguistic programming skills, were people who were working in coaching or corporate consulting.
Okay, thank you. So you then spent 7 years in the Life Makeover. So you were there for 7 years. So did you have a good experience?
Yeah, really. Yeah. It started off in one form as a coaching program called Reasons or Results, but the Life Makeover program is still running, and I am still the lead coach for Europe in that program. It's run through a guy called Harv Eker. He's quite well known for his book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind and for his live trainings and courses and stuff. And I've been working alongside them for about 10 years.
And so talk me through the importance of goals when it comes to business and life.
Well, I may have a somewhat different interpretation of goals to some people because I think some people get very set on having to have things turn out a particular way. I just think you need something to aim for. If you want to create results or success in your life, you need a target to move towards. But I do think it's sometimes helpful to not be too attached to it being exactly what you set out for. Somewhere close or similar to that is probably good enough, or if it takes a bit longer or if it happens a bit quicker, that's all fine as well. It's really more about get yourself moving towards it and get into action, because your idea of what you want in the future is probably going to evolve as you move closer to it anyway.
Yeah. So there's a saying that people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years.
There's that, and you don't really, I don't think you really see the battlefield, so to speak, until you're really in it and in progress. And if you haven't set yourself something to move towards, as this is an objective that I'd like to achieve, then you're not really moving anywhere anyway. You're just sort of in the flow of life and bobbing along in the stream rather than swimming in the direction that you actually want to go in.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So something I've talked about quite a lot on my solo podcast is setting goals and having things to aim for and working towards that every day to be able to achieve a long-term goal. Is there a difference between sort of, so I advise people to set goals every 6 months and then review them usually July, August time when you're sort of in your summer holidays, when we usually would be in our summer holidays, and then around Christmas time as well, because you can then you can tweak them, you can develop them as they go along throughout the year. But I totally agree, like you have a goal, but you never know what steps are going to come as blockers and what's going to come as enablers through that whole year. What do you think would be a sort of so do you plan for sort of long term, or do you do like a year? Do you usually plan for a year, or do you have sort of 10-20 year plans as well?
I don't so much do 10-20 year plans. I really just work with people on their key life areas. So I use sort of more like a wheel of life area. So we make sure that this is more in the Life Makeover program that we work on all of the key things. Usually that ends up being money and finance or business with most people, but sometimes it may end up going into discussing some things like relationships, which might be personal or professional relationships. It could be the recreation and play and social life. So, I don't think any part of life is so sectioned off that we can compartmentalize so much that we can say that everything affects everything else. And so in that sense, we'll work on, there may be short-term, medium-term and long-term goals. And I would always encourage people to go for more of the medium or long-term and at some point it becomes appropriate to work on legacy goals as well.
Oh, okay. So talk to me about legacy goals. What sort of things do people plan? Do they mean succession of their businesses? Do they mean financial security for their families?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
A lot of it is about financial security for their families with some people. So they want to set up systems of passive and residual income streams and investments that they're going to be able to pass on and keep their families supported into their future as well. But a lot of the time as well, that working with certain people, they actually have a vision for something that they'd like to leave to the world, like not so much a legacy as in just their will, but maybe setting up an organization that's going to keep helping people or keep supporting a charity or making some kind of long-term change.
And you mentioned a couple of times now about relationships. So I'm another thing that I talk a lot about is building relationships, building strong relationships with friends, colleagues, business associates. What's your view on how important relationships are?
And from a business perspective, particularly, they're vital. I think success in business, I see as being dependent on relationships. Whilst I think you can have success on your own and by yourself, it takes a lot longer. Whereas with a network and a supportive network, it can happen a lot faster. And I know from my own network, the people who I get connected with, who can help me with specific things. One example would just be today, right? I was speaking to somebody about being a guest on my podcast, and he mentioned that he used to have a podcast on comedy. And I said, well, actually, I'm working on a mini series within my podcast that's about using humor and comedy in presentation skills. Right. And he's introduced me or connected me with at least 50 people on LinkedIn now. So I have a whole slew to start talking to about that, which wouldn't happen without that networking and network building. And many of the people who I connect with through the podcast introduced me to great professional connections, other networks, other people who would be great guests, people who potentially work with as well. And I'm actually a president of a business networking chapter here in Valencia, and I value networking above most other things as a way to grow business and to learn.
So you've talked about learning a few times today. Have you yourself had a coach or a mentor in your career?
Yeah, I still do. I have several coaches, and I think anyone who's in the coaching profession, although my kind of coaching that I do privately is a bit more in the specific training kind of sector, but anyone who's in coaching and training should have their own coach. In fact, realistically, it's good for anybody to have a coach. If you want to progress and develop, it's having that accountability, it's having someone who is outside of your life who you can bounce stuff off and can see things a bit differently to you, or ask you some questions that will help you get more to the answers that you want. And I know not everybody I encounter feels like they need a coach, but I do feel like everyone could benefit from working with a coach.
So it's one of the things that I talk about quite a lot is coaches and how important they are. And I think it adds value that sometimes you don't even understand at the time or don't appreciate at that moment. I think, as you say, they give accountability, they give a different viewpoint outside. And I was actually talking to someone yesterday, and they were saying about some of their property friends are don't think they need a mentor. And I was just saying to him, and he's big on having coaches, but what would you say when people have completely a closed mindset and you're trying to influence, or you're trying to convince someone that a coach would be beneficial? What would you give the main criteria that would actually help somebody?
To be honest, if someone is really convinced that they're not ever going to work with a coach, I don't really see it as being my job to change their minds on it. But I will talk to them about coaching and results that people have achieved and attributed to working with a coach, and how it can be sometimes. There are many different styles of coaching as well, which I think is important to understand. That some people just think that coaching is more the ontological coaching, where your coach is just asking you questions, you have to come up with the answers. But there's also more of a mentorship style of coaching, or teaching style of coaching as well, or being the guide, or being the cheerleader and the accountability person for that person. There's a lot of different things that can come into coaching depending on your style of doing it. But if you think about a lot of people, something gets compared to the sports world, that every great sports person works with a coach. Yeah. Because no matter how good they are, there's things that they can't see. Even people who are better in their sports than their coaches still work with coaches, because the coaches can help them develop still, and they have that outside eye, and they give them the support, they give them the accountability, and build that relationship as well, to be able to have that conversation with somebody that is completely open and safe and secure, that's not being judged, and is allowing you space to say what you really want to say, and to explore ideas that you might sometimes be unwilling to share with other people in more daily life.
Absolutely. So one of the things you talk about, I've read that you talk about, is about coaching people to wealth. So what techniques do you use or if you were trying to coach me to wealth, how would you approach it? How would you get me in the right mindset?
Well, I can't claim that they are my own teachings. This is from working with Harv Eker, who has specialized in this area for a long time. However, the process that we take people through looks pretty much like this. That the first session that we work together with people on is a mindset session, where we try to uncover limiting beliefs and thoughts and unsupportive ideas, conditioning that we probably had growing up that is potentially keeping us small. I know for myself that I grew up with hearing things like money doesn't grow on trees, or rich people never get there by being good people, and you can't trust them, and all these kind of things. That was all in my head, and I had to undo that sort of thinking to be able to allow myself to move down a path that wasn't going to have me hating myself for doing something that could be valuable. So I started with mindset, then some goal setting to have some area to move into, to have some figures, some specific financial goals, both in active income and passive income. And then we start looking at the foundations of financial management, actually looking after your money, making it go well. We then teach something called the JAR system, which comes from Harv, which is about managing your personal finances. And from there, we teach we look at ways of exploring how to increase active income. And then most of the people who come into the program that we run have never done any kind of investing and don't have any kind of passive or residual income. So we then teach what those types of income can look like, and we start them picking a path towards making a start there and exploring that further, so they understand what those principles are. And one of the key overviews of the whole program is that financial freedom isn't the same as wealth. Financial freedom just means that you have enough investment or passive residual income to cover your living expenses, your basic living expenses. And so you could be financially free and living a very basic life if you're willing to live that. And some people might be very happy with that, but most people probably want a bit more. But we certainly wrap up that with a service and contribution section as well. We believe that giving and giving back is vital as well.
Absolutely. That sounds a fascinating course. Where can people find that?
And if you go to harbecker.com or Harbecker Academy, then you will be able to find details of that. We are actually starting that program, the next cycle of it, on the 10th of August. And but we're going to be running it in continuity. So it should be, even if you don't get into the next cycle, you can join the one afterwards.
Okay, awesome. So someone that's inspired me relatively recently, it's been a book that's been on my bucket list for a long time, which is Rich Dad, Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. Do you subscribe to his belief that assets equal wealth?
Yeah, I do. And I think that I've had very much the same message from Daniel Priestley. I don't know if you know Daniel Priestley.
Yeah.
But certainly, he has a great book also, which I recommend, called 24 Assets. And that's very much about creating wealth through asset building. And you do have to define an asset isn't necessarily just a physical thing that you have. An asset could be a business automation or an investment stream, but it could, so having certainly one of the things that Harv teaches, and I think Daniel has said this as well, and I don't think Robert Kiyosaki would argue, I know he and Harv are good friends as well, is about having diverse income streams. So you not just having all of your money in one place. Now, you can't set that up straight away, but over time, you can certainly do that and move towards having more diverse income sources, ideally having them automated and residual rather than things that you are having to actively work for all the time.
And how do you teach managing wealth or having wealth and keeping wealth in a recession? Because we're in COVID at the moment, and there's almost certainly going to be a recession. How do you suggest people manage their wealth and their assets through recessions?
I think one of the most important things here is that first of all, don't panic, and don't think that you have to sort of liquidate everything and try and have as much cash available, or that everything's going to be a disaster. There's always opportunity even in times of crisis, and keeping calm about this and looking for where the sensible money is going is probably the best thing. Like, a lot of people will panic and try and when people panic, they do things that they may not ordinarily do that aren't necessarily in their best interest. It's not a good emotional state for decision making, because it's a high emotion state, which means that your logical thinking is low. So it's important to, you can have that at first, but get yourself out of that, get yourself calm before you do anything and make any decisions. Staying consistent with basic money management principles is going to hold you instead. I really don't think it's ever all about how much money or assets you've got in the first place. It's really about, the greatest asset is yourself and what you know. So never to panic about all this stuff. You will always find the opportunities, and reach out to your network, unify with other people, and step up and be the leader for others, and look for the other people who are showing up as leaders as well, because they will be out there looking for opportunity. But if you're focused on the stress of it all or the downside of it, I think it's really just going to take you down that path of thinking that there's no opportunities. I remember reading some time back a book called The Luck Factor by Dr. Richard Wiseman, if you've ever come across it. I think it's a great book. And it discusses how luck works, that it's not like a mysterious force or some kind of supernatural thing. It's a psychology. And that people who believe that they're lucky tend to act in accordance with that belief. So they do things that more likely to do, take more chances perhaps, maybe have a conversation with somebody and just randomly that you might not otherwise do if you feel that you're an unlucky person. And even Darren Brown did some great experiments on a TV show about this when he visited Todmorden, and just was able to show that luckier people do take those opportunities and those chances more, and are more likely to notice things that come up for them, or even just money in the street and things like that. It's a mindset of looking for those opportunities, whereas the unlucky people will probably walk right past any opportunities and often won't even see things that are staring them right in the face. because they are convinced that they're unlucky, and I guess that part of their brain, the reticular activating system that sort of scans and searches for information, is set on unlucky. They're looking for the next thing that's going to get them.
And it's really interesting you've talked about opportunities and seeing opportunities and seizing opportunities as well, because from my 20s, when I was in my 20s, that there were opportunities that came across my path, and I wasn't in the right mindset to really seize them. If there's someone listening today that is in a negative mindset when it comes to finding opportunities and seizing opportunities, what would you say to them to try and encourage them away from that and into a sort of a luckier version, or a seizing opportunities?
Well, certainly they could read the Luck Factor. I think that might help in the understanding of that where your energy and where your thinking is at is what you're going to see appearing in your life. And I'm not one of those people who believes in like law of attraction and things like that, or supernatural woo-woo stuff. I'm very down to earth. I like stuff that's scientifically proven and that actually works. But it's very clear that where your psychology is at is what you're going to see happening in your life. You're going to attract people who fit more with that psychology and don't feel threatened by it. And if you bring yourself down, it's not going to help. I know sometimes I get people listening to people talking about positivity and stuff and saying, well, they have the depression or a condition. And I'm not talking about how you deal with that. It's like, okay, if you have stuff that's going on that's making it very hard for you to be more positive and happier, please try and do something about that and get some help that's going to do this. And maybe this is going to take a while for you to get there, and it might be a bit harder. But for most people, it really is just that shift of attitude of, first of all, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Don't be in a victim mentality about this, because you can't afford it. And if you want to argue for your limitations and your problems, you get to keep them, unfortunately. So to move out of this, you really have to move into, even if you can't see where the possibilities are right now, just being in a better energy. I ask people, how do you want to experience your life? Do you want to experience your life painting everything with black or painting everything with white? Do you want to have happier days, or do you want to feel miserable every day? And that comes from within. It's not something that comes from the external world. No matter how bad things are on the outside, you can still choose to have a better internal state. It might take some work sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's your view on risk?
I believe that every day there is risk. So I do think that my personal perspective is that risks have to be taken, but ideally not foolish risks. We take gambles in life all the time, but hopefully we aim more to take educated gambles than silly risks. But everyone has a different level of risk tolerance. And people who have really low risk tolerance are probably going to stay where they are for a very long time until they do something about it. Excuse me.
That's not so fun. So you've got something called the Success Books Club. So I actually saw this on social media relatively recently, someone giving a review of a book on LinkedIn. So just tell me a little bit about Successful Books Club. Can people join? Are you educating people on the best business books that are around?
Well, the idea, yeah, I mean, that's where it started off, just doing some reviews. Because I read so much, I read on average 2 audio books I listen to a week, and I try and get through at least 1 or 2 Kindle downloads a week as well. So I like.
That's pretty prolific.
Yeah, and I like to keep myself educated, but I always aim to get the best stuff. And I know that because of how much information I get through, I do come across some stuff that's really valuable, some stuff that's kind of okay, and some stuff that really I just wouldn't bother. And so I think it's useful for people to have some pointer into what's the stuff that's actually worth bothering with, at least from someone else's perspective, saying, okay, I don't always think the reviews on Amazon and the likes are always helpful, because sometimes they are pre-arranged, and sometimes they get offers like, give me a good review on Amazon and I'll give you these bonuses and stuff like that. Yeah. So they're not always reliable on there, and some reviews that I've seen on there for books that I thought were terrible, I've had like 5-star reviews, and I can't understand it. So of course it is just from my perspective, but I hope that as a coach and someone who's well read in the area, that I can give good reviews to people. At the moment, that was sort of going to go down the path of being a regular book club, and may still in the future. But at the moment, I'm just focusing on doing weekly book reviews. And at the moment, I'm doing them at about 90 seconds. And for people who want to see them, I'm putting them on my YouTube channel and on LinkedIn. So those are the places to see them at the moment.
And so, what's the best book that you've read in 2020 or listened to in 2020?
Oh my goodness, there are so many.
Name a few, it's fine.
One recently was a reread, to be honest. It was an updated version of a book on business, client-based businesses, called Book Yourself Solid by Michael Port. Really good book, and the updated version had a lot of extra value in it that wasn't in earlier editions, because it has more relevant information, like some of the websites and strategies listed before wouldn't be doable now. Even some of the platforms I talked about don't even exist anymore. So that is a really good book for anyone who's wanting to do presentation work and public speaking. I would say I might have to check my Audible, because that's where that's where it's all listed, and doesn't all come to top of mind straight away. But I absolutely love Audible, and
yeah, me too.
I think I get so much value from it. But let's just see what's there. Made to Stick, Dan and Chip Heath. That was an excellent book. And just after reading it, I got it recommended to me by 2 podcast guests. That was pretty cool. And Persuasion is the follow-up to Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion from Robert Cialdini.
Yeah.
Persuasion, really, really good book. There's tons of others in there, but those are 3 really good ones that I've read this year.
Thank you very much. So you're a founder of the Present Influence, which, and so first of all, tell me a little bit about Present Influence, and I've got a subsequent question afterwards.
So Present Influence is really about bringing together 2 of my greatest interests and passions, which is public speaking and presentation work, and the tools, or as Cialdini calls them, the weapons of influence and persuasion. And that also includes things like rhetorical devices and the sort of more ancient oratory skills of rhetoricians and speakers.
And so which top class leaders do you model on?
Many, really. I have a lot of them on as guests on my own podcast. So, but some of the best speakers I've ever come across would be people like Harv Eker, who I work with. He's a very passionate public speaker. One of my favorites is a guy called Les Brown, and I just think he's a really funny guy, and it's very disarming. It's very easy to learn stuff and to remember it when it's funny in stories. One of my favorite speakers who I spoke to recently is a professional storyteller and teaches storytelling. And he has a book called Storyworthy. And to me, it's just gold. His name's Matthew Dix, and he has a YouTube channel as well. And he's won the Moth Story Slam in the US 48 times, and their Grand Slam, their big championship, 6 times. And he's an incredible storyteller, and someone that definitely who I aspire to be more like, and I'm working to be a bit more like.
So as you are a presenter and influence coach, what makes a presentation different? Because it's very you can get quite formulaic presentations, but I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming to try and influence people how to be better presenters, you need to find a USP. You need to find something unique about them, but how do you build in sort of making presentations different and not just lethargic PowerPoint presentations?
Yeah. firstly, I generally don't use PowerPoint unless it's an online presentation. I don't really like it. I don't find it helpful. And I think a lot of people already know that Jeff Bezos has banned PowerPoint presentations from Amazon. And I'm with him on that. I think it's probably a good idea. Most people have experienced death by PowerPoint at some point in their lives. So I'd much rather deliver good information. And the way I've been taught to do it and the way I teach people to do it is to start with really getting clear with people when you're delivering content about why they need to know it. Like, you have to answer the question of what's in it for me? Why should I care about what you're talking about? And if you can't answer that, then you're already in for some problems. So you have to start with that. Where I think a lot of people go wrong is having just data heavy presentations, particularly in the business world. And I know Michael Port talks about this in his book, but I agree 100% that some people just think, I've given you all the data, that's it, I've done my presentation. And most people will walk out of the meeting room and forget all about it. Yeah. So data in itself isn't enough. It has to be taught about how to implement it, why it matters, where we're going with it, get some discussion going if that's appropriate in the kind of presentation you're doing, and stories with it as well about why this stuff matters, because otherwise people won't remember it. For anyone giving a kind of presentation or public speaking speech, the best thing you can do is tell a story, and ideally it should be a story from your life that's pretty much true, and you can make some alterations in like the timeline and things like that, but don't make up stuff, don't tell lies, but mostly that's the kind of story that works in terms of making something more memorable. We remember stories, we remember stuff that people get passionate about. Yeah. But the worst thing for me is presentations with no passion, with no energy in them, where it's just at one tone the whole time and just drones on, and you might hear lots of umming and ahhing. Now I can cope with umming and ahhing if it's an interesting and lively presentation, but if it's a monotony, I really can't. Most people will go to sleep.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the data-heavy presentations. A lot of people sometimes think, as you say, they give you the data in the slides. But I've been helping someone in my work and sort of saying, like, you've got all the tools, you know the stuff. Stop just trying to put down every point that you want in a 2 or 3 sentence sort of bullet point. Make less is more. Yeah. and talk around it. As you were saying, storytelling, tell something that is of interest to the people listening. That will engage your audience so much more.
Yeah, if you're going to use PowerPoints or visual aids at all, then I recommend not making them bullet points of your notes, because that's boring for a start. Have as little writing on them as possible, and have visual illustrations about what you're talking about, or maybe even humorous illustrations that help make the point, because people will remember that more. But generally in a live presentation, I would avoid it. In an online presentation, it can work very well if you do the presentation in the right kind of way. But again, wordy slides do not help.
Yeah, totally agree. So what tool do you use instead of PowerPoint?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last bit.
What tool do you use instead of PowerPoint?
If I'm going to use anything, I'm more likely to use a flip chart or a whiteboard.
Okay, so you would completely leave the whole concept of visual aids unless it's pictures or something enabling the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah, because you can actually do that. It's more interactive. So long as you don't turn your back on the audience, it's just more interactive and illustrative. You can do it as you're going along, and it seems more relevant than to write down a key word, or even to get some interaction from your audience and write down some of the things that come back from them as well, because then they're seeing stuff that they write down being considered and added to consideration. But in terms of this, one of the best things you can do if you're trying to illustrate something is use a diagram, and they can draw it, a square, a triangle, a circle, and people understand diagrams very well. They can if they're making notes, they can make a note of the diagram really easily. And again, because it's a bit more visual for them, they're more likely to remember it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said, and I'd seen in my research, that you live in Valencia in Spain. So very lucky, very lucky, maybe not lucky, maybe it was a choice. But so how do you work remotely? How have you? So probably pre-COVID, you were already working remotely. So how does, just tell me not say a day in the life of you, but sort of what's the sort of format, and how do you enjoy living out in Spain?
Well, I have been working remotely for over 10 years, and it's been working very well for me. So it wasn't a huge adjustment for me to move anything around whilst I started working online. It just really meant that I had more time available for work, I guess, for me. But I do most of my work either on Skype calls or Zoom calls like this. I do Zoom webinars as well. So a lot of my group coaching and group training work is on webinars. And I love that as well. I think you can get a lot of great energy. So I do like doing live public speaking work, and I haven't had so much opportunity to do that lately.
Yeah.
But doing online presentation work is still fun as well.
Yeah.
And is more where I've been trained and conditioned over the last 10 years anyway, because I've done so much of it. So it's become more of a specialist area for me anyway. And I really enjoy it. You know, it's kind of nice in some ways not to have to travel to work with clients. I still work with a lot of them on video as well, so we can still get some level of rapport and connection on a deep level. But even sometimes just working on audio with clients, you can still get great results and still work very happily together. I mean, I've had to do that. I've had several clients in the UAE where a lot of the VoIP apps are not allowed, although at the moment Zoom is. So we've been able to use Zoom recently. But for the longest time, we had to use phone because they couldn't use Skype and things like that. So we're making the most of Zoom before it possibly ends up getting zapped as well. But I find it's a great platform, and it's very limiting. You know, in my earlier days of coaching, people had to come to you or you had to go to them. And that adds a lot to the time of things if you have to travel to your meetings. Whereas if I was doing a group event or a live workshop, I would rather do it in person. But to be honest, the results that myself and many other people who are in the industry are reporting back about doing online workshops, whilst they probably generally prefer the live stuff as well, are still getting fantastic results working with clients. And many people like myself are going to keep those parts as part of the business as well, keep those events as online things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just tell me something about Valencia. What do you enjoy doing in Valencia apart from your, remote business?
And there's very much to do here. It's the third biggest city in Spain, but it's much smaller than Barcelona and Madrid. But it has beautiful architecture. It has pretty much everything you would want to have in a city, but much less people and much less going on. And it has the beach, it's by the sea, and beautiful historic city centre, a big riverbed park, which I just love to go walking in. There's like years and years ago, they blocked off the river running through the city and made it into a giant park that runs right through the heart of the city. Oh, wow. And it's a place where people are always gathering to do exercise, we're walking, running, meeting, socializing, picnicking, whatever. It's a fantastic park. And I work right in the heart of the city in what they call the Plaza Ayuntamiento. And just the variety of shops, bars, restaurants, you'll never get bored for going out options there. And nightlife is very much a sort of street nightlife that people are sitting outside because the weather's generally pretty good here. And so it's a lot more outside life. So now that everything is sort of back up and running more or less, even though people have mostly got face masks on everywhere, the evening life here, I'm not talking about nightclubbing, so I'm not too old for that, but just the bars, restaurants and clubs, it all feels very sociable and very relaxed. I love it.
Oh, I might have to take a trip to Valencia sometime. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah,
I,
it's
I,
well
love
worth it.
Madrid. I love Madrid and I love Barcelona. I think Barcelona's an absolutely amazing, fascinating city. I haven't been to Valencia, so maybe next year I might take a trip.
Yeah, it's worth it. There's more than oranges here.
Yes, yes. So I have to confess something to you before we carry on, John. I was going to ask you, have you considered doing a podcast? Because on my research, I didn't find that you had a podcast, but you've said a couple of times that you do actually have a podcast. So tell me a little bit about that.
So my podcast is called Speaking of Influence, and so it's really about the stuff that I like to do for work because it's my passion and interest as well. And I do several episodes a week. The first one is just me talking, teaching stuff, or talking about presentation skills and influence stuff. And then I interview someone from the world of presenting, public speaking, or presentation skills. For some people are professional speakers, some of them not so much, but they use speaking as part of their business, and they have some understanding of influence. I was chatting to a guy who was trained by MI5 in one of my earlier episodes. That was really interesting. So just get a lot of sense of, I have a lot of scope for many different things that I can talk about. And so I've done several episodes on storytelling. I'm going to be doing a whole mini series in the podcast on humor and comedy and presentations. And there's also a sub-series I do in there, which is the dark side of influence and persuasion. And so I've got like cults and hidden influence that gets used against people, sort of the nasty dark stuff that the people generally don't know about, but I think people are interested in. In fact, I have a guest coming on Friday. He was we're not publishing on Friday, but we're recording on Friday, and she's was a part of a cult as well. It was a person that her parents got into, and she while she was young, and she ended up getting away from it, and now her family have all gotten away from it, and setting up another episode with a lady who was in a doomsday cult who I'm going to speak to as well. So it's interesting to talk about those things, and I talk about how people move away from that, and what sort of tools that these organizations use to bring people in and to keep people in once they're there as well. I think that's already interesting, and my belief is that when we understand what the tools or weapons of influence and persuasion are, we can protect ourselves against them. But in the world of presentation, if you don't know how to use tools of influence and persuasion, and hopefully use them ethically, which is how I teach people to use them, then you may struggle to get much cooperation or get people interacting, and your presentations can be a lot more powerful when you use these tools well as well.
Absolutely. Sounds fascinating. I'm definitely going to check that out. It sounds really interesting. I like the way you've gone slightly left field and started talking about the darker side of persuasion, because I think that would just be a fascinating exploration, because people see in sales you need to persuade people, but actually that's very conventional. Actually having that sort of sideways look at it would be very, very interesting. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the podcast. I've got 5 questions which I ask everyone on my podcast. They're short fire questions, but they don't need a short fire answer. It's up to you. So what was the best decision that you made?
Oh my goodness. Probably to get married.
Fantastic. What's the best piece of advice that you were given?
The best piece of advice I was given was to stop taking life so seriously.
That's lovely. Who has helped you most in your career?
There have been many, many people, and I would say probably is my marketing coach, Taki Moore.
And what's he added to you? Obviously marketing, but like, how has he approached it?
From a very understandable, hand-holding kind of way that even if you've never done marketing before, you'll be able to figure it out. and really he has the all killer no filler attitude to delivering content, which I love. Like there's no waffle, there's no unnecessaries. We can still have fun while we learn and while we do stuff, while we work together. But he's never gonna put fluff in there.
That's awesome. Do you have any regrets?
Not really, because there are things that I probably wish I hadn't done or might have done differently. I said, if I could go back and give myself advice on what subjects to do for my degree, I might well change it. But I don't actually regret, because I'm really very happy with where my life is at. And, I hope I've apologized for all the things that I might have done that have upset or hurt people in the past. And those are probably the only things that I may still regret. But in terms of my general life decisions, no.
Awesome. And what are you most proud of?
I would say I am most proud of myself for sticking with it when I've had plenty of cause and opportunity to give up and do something else, that I've stuck with it, and that I believed that I could still do it. I managed to pick myself up off the ground enough times to know that I can keep going.
Awesome. Right. Thank you so much for the interview. The last thing I just want you to share with us is, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you for your courses, for your webinars, for your podcasts, for your books, for your businesses? Where can people find you?
But you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me as John Abel, or through my Present Influence site on there as well. I have a website, presentinfluence.com. People can come and check me out there. You can find me on YouTube as well, which is a great place to get my more regular videos, as well as I upload my podcast onto there as well. So you find Present Influence on YouTube, and you'll find me and my videos.
Right, that's been wonderful. Just thank you again. It's been a fascinating talk through your career and through your businesses. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. I've really enjoyed it.
Cheers. Excellent. Thanks.